And it looks like everybody is doing what you did in church a couple hours ago. You sat as far from the back, except for Lemuel. You are the A student. Everybody's sitting in the back. So, B, you get a B. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you're a B student. Find a seat. So as you guys are getting settled, hey, Bob, you notice there's a couple cameras around the room. I decided to ask our media team to record this training so that those who can't be here, whether it be here in DFW or at other places we've done this around the conference, they're able to participate. We chose Grand Prairie because today was an extra good hair day for me. So know that it's recorded again. Everybody's going to see the back of you, but we want to make this available for everyone who cannot be a part of it, or if you want to watch it again because it's that compelling, or you fall asleep, we'll have something to do. All right. Are we ready? All right. So we are going to talk about harmony in the house. And the house we're talking about is not necessarily just your home. It is the, Bob, I heard you say it, the church. Now, I recognize, having pastored in DFW for 10 and a half years, there are no churches in the Metroplex that have conflict. All of the churches that have conflict are outside of DFW. But because this is our theme, I got to bore you with conflict because, again, all of the churches in North Texas, you all don't have conflict. So humor me for the next hour and a half. Let's get on the same page. What is a definition of conflict? Conflict is a disagreement or clash between, and I know it's a little hard to see, we'll make this available to you guys after today, between ideas, principles, or people. Think about any conflict that you have experienced. Was it a clash or a disagreement between ideas? I have an idea, you have a different idea. Okay, we're not on the same page. What about principles? Okay, this is the back and forth. Or people. Sometimes there's personality conflicts, aren't they? There are just some people that you just can't get along with, it seems like. Or they can't get along with you. So conflict is a clash or a disagreement between ideas, principles, or people. What are the levels of conflict? Where does it happen? They can occur at a personal level, intrapersonal. Have you ever felt conflicted in your own mind? I think this, not sure, maybe this. Maybe. That's intrapersonal. Then there's interpersonal, conflict between people. I'm sure you've not experienced that. If you're married, you have never in a million years fought with your spouse. That's interpersonal conflict. And then there's conflict at an organizational level within a group of people. In our context, it's a church. What are the type of conflicts? Personal conflicts. Again, intrapersonal. Feeling conflicted. Different ideas. Do I do this? Do I believe this? What is all this? Interpersonal, again, between individuals. The best example, again, is between a husband and a wife. Even when I say yes, dear, all the time, sometimes my wife and I get into some conflict, some disagreement. And then organizational. Conflict in a church, in our context. And here's what I will say. When it comes to interpersonal relationship or organizational conflict, if it is not taken care of and not dealt with, it will fracture relationships. It can cause divorce, resentment, frustration on the interpersonal, if it's between a husband and wife. It can cause friendships to disintegrate. But also at the organizational level, it can cause churches to split. So I know this is rudimentary, but I want us to make sure that we are on the same page. Uh-oh. Come on. All right. Give me 1 second. It popped off the internet, and I don't know why. Should be good now. All right. All right. Causes of conflict. Again, I'm just going to try to run through this. Miscommunication. Misunderstandings or lack of clear communication can lead to conflict. Have you ever had an issue with miscommunication? How many of you are parents? Keep your hand up if you are parents of teenagers or older. Have you had miscommunication with your teenagers and your young adults at some point in their life? Were you always right? I was waiting. Sometimes there's miscommunication. You think you're communicating well, but there's a disconnect somewhere. And that miscommunication can lead to conflict. In the church, have you seen miscommunication being a root issue of conflict? Differences in values and beliefs. I don't know how many of you have been around for a while, but in the 80s and the 90s, we had in the Adventist church worship wars. What kind of music is appropriate? That was a difference in values and beliefs. And again, there's been churches that have split over that. And resource scarcity. There's only so much of something, and we got to figure out the best way to divide it. Where I saw this in my pastorate over almost 30 years is the local church budget offerings. We have a pile of money that comes in. Every ministry thinks their ministry is the most important. So they should get the most what? Money. So if I'm leading the youth and Kevin's leading the children's, we're going to have a conflict because he thinks children's the most important. I think youth is most important. So there's going to be conflict because there's only so much to go around. There's resource scarcity. What's the biblical perspective on conflict? Is there conflict in the Bible? Yes. Almost from the very beginning, right? Who was the first conflict between? Adam and Eve. And then the next one was? Cain and Abel. That didn't turn out really well, did it? Especially for Abel. There was conflict. There is conflict throughout Scripture. We'll come back to that in a minute. How does the Bible ask us as followers of Christ to address conflict? There is a certain chapter in the Bible that gives us an outline. That chapter is Matthew 18. Now, if I read my Bible right, Matthew 18 says, if you have a problem with a brother, you gossip about it. No, that's not it. then how in the world do I see that all the time in the church? Okay. Human nature. What does it say? If I have a problem with my brother or sister, I go to them. And then if I can't have that solved, then it's take someone with you. And then Matthew 18 tells us as Christ followers how to deal with conflict. Why is it then that we as Christians don't follow Jesus when it comes to conflict? Rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it. I love what it says in Ephesians. Deals with anger without sinning. Anger is an emotion, but you can have anger but sin not. That's exactly right. And that, I will say, and we can spend a whole hour on that, that is a hard line to follow. I'll leave it there. And then Romans 12:18 says, if at all possible, live at peace with all men. God doesn't want conflict in his people and with his people. There's some quick, I'll go through that. Some of the conflict. We talked about Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers, David and Saul. New Testament, dispute between Paul and Barnabas over John Mark, Peter and Paul over Jewish customs, and then Jesus and the Pharisees. The best way, the only way to deal with conflict is to have a conversation, right? Have a conversation with the person you're in conflict with. Make that clear. We have lots of conversations about conflict. I am convinced, and again, I will say this, I've been a Seventh-day Adventist my entire life for almost 51 years. We probably are some of the best group of people with gossip. It is amazing to me. I had somebody text me the other day asking me about something that had not been released publicly yet. And the only way that that got released was there was gossip. We love this. What is it? Telephone, telegraph, tell an Adventist. It is awful. But is it true? So the best way to deal with conflict is conversations. How do we have these conversations? And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time. Every conversation, I want you to think of conversations that you have throughout the day. Maybe even conversations you had today at church or a potluck, at home before you got ready, at home before you got up from your nap. The importance of conversation. Every conversation. How many conversations? Every conversation is an opportunity to do what? Deepen relationships and resolve conflict. Every conversation. You're either deepening a relationship and or you're dealing with a conflict. That's the importance of conversation. If we see every conversation as an opportunity to deepen relationships, how would that change our conversations? Interrogating reality. What that means is addressing the real issues instead of avoiding them. We are good at kicking things down the road. I will admit, I do not enjoy conflict. Because of what I do for a living, I have to deal with conflict, but I don't enjoy it. I'd much rather avoid conflict. And part of that has to do with my upbringing and all that kind of stuff, and we can psychoanalyze me later. But it's much easier for many of us to avoid conflict than deal with it. Or it's much easier for us to deal with another issue than actually deal with the real issue. But we have to, in order to have good conversations, we need to make sure we're dealing with the real issue, not a tangential issue. or avoiding the issue altogether. Tackling tough conversations. What that means is approaching difficult conversations with, can you see the word? Honesty and courage. Do you realize honesty is not a core value of the United States culture in 2025? I was in an accident in Florida last February. My fault. The police were there, took the report. I told them it was my fault. And literally, I had the sheriff's deputy say to me, "Thank you for being honest." I'm like, so you're saying, and I knew the answer, but I'm like, so not everybody's honest, huh? He's like, you would be surprised. And I said, no, I'm a pastor. I'm not surprised. But we need to approach conversations with honesty, putting our cards on the table, so to speak. And we have to tackle tough conversations with courage. Please.
I wonder if every person knows about how to have a conversation. Because if you don't have the right tools or words, you can have a conflict there.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about that. Because a conversation isn't me yelling at you. So key takeaways. Understanding conflict. Do you have a good sense of what conflict is? Disagreement or clash between ideas, principles, or people occurring at an intrapersonal in myself, interpersonal between people, or at an organizational level. Types of conflict we just talked about. Causes of conflict, and I want to come back to this. I would say the biggest contributor to conflict in the church and in marriages is miscommunication. But there's also differences in values, beliefs, and expectations, and resource scarcity. Biblical perception, again, how does God ask us to deal with conflict? If I have a brother who sinned against me, what do? I go to the church, right? See? You go have a conversation. Principles of conversation. Seeing every conversation as an opportunity to deepen a relationship and to potentially and or deal with the conflict. Address real issues. Not avoiding the issues, but dealing with the issues. And then thirdly, having these difficult conversations, approaching them with honesty and with courage. All right, we're going to have some group time. I know you guys love group time. You do not want to hear me talk for 90 minutes, trust me. So I want you to get into groups. I know this isn't ideal because of the setup, but I think we can pull it off. Get in groups of 3. And if you need to pull your chairs over, get in groups of 3. Find people you don't know. So get in groups of 3. And I'm going to give you some questions. We're going to stay in those groups for the second half because I'm going to have you have some conversations. So let's get in groups of 3. Pull your chairs. Find somebody that you don't know.